Should teenagers be allowed to pastor other teenagers? I know that's a difficult question to ask, because it is true that there are young people who are genuinely called by God, who are, spiritually mature beyond their years, and that there are young people who have led exceptionally well. And in fact, most of our favorite men and women of God today started leading from a very young age. So I'm not asking this question because I believe young people cannot lead. I myself have led at a young age. I'm asking because of something that has been happening in the Nigerian Christian space recently. And I think it's high time we had a very uncomfortable conversation. Who is watching the young people we put in charge of other young people? Now, recently, there's been a lot of conversation online regarding allegations of sexual misconduct involving a young church leader who had responsibility over teenagers. Now, I want to be very careful here because these are very serious allegations. And when there are allegations of criminal behavior, nobody should be declared guilty just because it is trending on social media. I mean, there should be proper investigation, and I understand that. That's why I'm being very careful with this. But whether or not every single claim is eventually proven, this situation has actually forced me to think about something I've been thinking about for many years. And that is the question of young people who have been placed in spiritual authority over other young people. There are questions to be asked. And this really is not about one person or one church. I think this is a question that every youth ministry, teenage ministry, or even campus fellowship needs to have, and urgently so. And I have a personal reason for saying this. You see, when I was in the university, I was the president of my fellowship, my campus fellowship, and I was the vice president of the joint campus fellowship as well. And because of my position, I had a relationship with many other leaders on campus and even in other universities as well. I interacted with young people. I interacted with teenagers. I saw things. I heard things. I witnessed things. But I also understood something very important about leadership. And that is the fact that being a leader does not immediately stop you from being human. In fact, it never ever stops you from being human. I knew what it's like for people to look up to me. I knew what it's like for members of the opposite sex to be around me, to flock around me. And sometimes these people innocently did not necessarily understand the boundaries that should exist between themselves and someone they actually look up to. Not because they were bad people, but they just did not know better. They were young. They were figuring out their emotions. They were figuring out life. And if I, as a leader, did not fear God and understand my responsibility, I could have easily taken advantage of that. And so I understood something very early, and claim that leadership is not about wielding power. Leadership is about knowing what to do with the power you're wielding. And this is where the Nigerian church needs to start asking difficult questions. Because you see, sometimes we are overly impressed with giftings, with talents. Can this person preach? Can he sing? Can she speak in tongues? Can she pray? Can she, lead the word, teach the word? Can they lay hands on the sick? Can they make teenagers excited about Jesus? And yes, these things are important, but are we asking enough questions about character? Because when Apostle Paul was giving Timothy instructions about what it means to be a spiritual leader, he wasn't only mentioning spiritual gifts. He talked a lot about character as well. He talked about being above reproach, being self-controlled, being respectable, be able to manage yourself, be able to control your household. And taking a look at that and a look at what is happening in the church today tells me something. Maybe we have become too impressed with what people can do on a platform and less impressed and paying less attention to what people do when no one is watching. A person can genuinely love God, but still need more time to grow. And see, like I said before, I'm not saying young people cannot lead. My pastor, Apostle Emmanuel Iren, became a pastor as a teenager when he was in the campus. And from my own experience of knowing him and watching his life, I see what exemplary leadership should look like. So the problem is not youth. The problem is not that someone is young. The problem is putting someone in a position of authority and assuming that because they are gifted, they should automatically have the maturity to handle everything that comes to them. And in my opinion, that's where I think we need to do better. Because if you give a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old responsibility over 50 teenagers, I have a question. Who is pastoring that 19-year-old? Who is checking up on them? Who is the oversight over them? Who are they accountable to? Who is mentoring them? Who is asking them difficult questions? Who can they run to and talk to openly and safely when they're struggling? Who do they talk to when they're developing sexual feelings or romantic feelings for someone they're supposed to be leading? Who do they talk to when they're angry? Who do they talk to when they're struggling with pornography? Who can their subordinates report to when they are becoming high-handed, when they are, abusing power? Who can their subordinates report to and they will be in pole position to actually do something meaningful about the situation. You see, many times we give young people authority without necessarily giving them accountability. We put them on a pedestal. We tell them they're special, they're anointed of God, they can do amazing things, which is true. But then suddenly nobody can question them, nobody can challenge them, nobody can tell them what they're doing is wrong. That is dangerous, because you see, the higher position of authority you are in, the higher the need for accountability as well. And most especially when you're dealing with young people. A pastor is not just a friend. A pastor is someone that people trust, someone that people can look up to, someone that represents God. A teenager may come to you about their deepest secrets and confide in you and tell you about their family, about their struggles, about their sexuality, about, so many deep things that they probably wouldn't share with anybody else. Now, that creates a power imbalance. It creates a responsibility. And when there is that power imbalance, the person with the authority is the one that must create boundaries. In that situation, no matter how emotional, no matter how free, no matter how open that teenager gets with the leader, the responsibility is not on the teenager to protect or resist whatever might be happening. The responsibility is on the leader. No matter how young or old that leader is, the responsibility is on the leader to protect the teenager, because they may not know what they are doing. They may not know what they're saying, but the leader is expected to know, and not just know, but know the consequences of whatever might come out from that relationship dynamic. And speaking of protection, who is protecting these young people? These young leaders, who is protecting them? Who is safeguarding them? What systems have we put in place to protect them? Do we have clear rules about how young pastors and young church leaders should react and interact with minors? Are there proper boundaries around private meetings? Boundaries around counseling? Are there clear channels where young people can report inappropriate behavior without fear, without, being silenced? And when that happens, who investigates it? Who makes the decision? How do we protect the person who is making the allegation while the investigation is ongoing? These are not questions that should be asked after something terrible happens. It should be asked before. And honestly, my fear is that this conversation may be bigger than just one story that went viral. Because it's not every victim that has come out to say what has happened to them. Not every victim speaks. A lot of people are, just suffering in silence. A lot of people are afraid or ashamed or, don't think that people will believe them, or are even blaming themselves for the situation. And some people will carry this stigma for years without ever saying anything. And so if we're waiting for, situations like this to go viral before we start asking these questions, then we're already too late. We need to start asking these questions now, before another victim, before another terrible situation like this. We need to start asking these questions long before any other young person finds themselves in a position of authority that they're not ready for. But I'd like to hear your opinion. What do you think? Do you think that young people should be allowed to pastor other young people? Or do you think, every youth and teenage ministry should have more mature people acting as oversights, and then maybe young people just, do one or two or hold certain leadership roles within the system, but have a more mature oversight over them? Or what do you think about it? I'd like to know your opinion, because this is definitely a conversation that we need to have before the next story breaks, because may God help us. Thank you for watching. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click on the notifications button so that you're notified when there's new content on the channel. My name is Goodness Eze. Thank you for watching. Adios.